Pinup star Betty Grable rocketed to fame after just one photograph, but few knew that she was hiding a nearly ruinous secret in the iconic image. Her sly smile turned toward the camera is one of the most iconic images in history. As the pin-up queen of the world, Grable lived a scandalous life that's the stuff of Hollywood movies. While her girl-next-door image has endured through the 21st century, the reality of her dark, dramatic life was anything but wholesome. When the United States entered World War II, Hollywood began producing morale-boosting content for the Americans serving abroad. One way to cheer up the servicemen was pin-up photographs of famous actresses, which they made into posters and shipped overseas. Rita Hayworth popularised the pin-up, but it was Betty Grable who became its most famous model. Betty earned the nickname $1 Million Legs, and she didn't get it for nothing. As a publicity stunt, Grable's studio went and actually insured her legs for a literal $1 million at the height of her fame. Hosiery specialists and retailers often cited her legs as having the perfect proportions for stockings, and Grable herself was under no illusions about what brought in the big bucks. As she once quipped, "I became a star for 2 reasons, and I'm standing on them." As a child, Betty was blonde, rosy-cheeked, and adorable, but that didn't mean her life was perfect, or even well-adjusted. Her mother, Lillian, was pushy and forced her daughter into dance lessons and countless child beauty contests in search of fame. Granted, Betty won most of the pageants, but her mother didn't stop there. When Lillian couldn't find any new dance class or pageant to enroll Betty in, she turned to her own friends to get her fame fix. On slow days, Lillian would present Betty at casual gatherings and demand that the girl perform for the adults on command. Grable might have been a successful child performer around her local area, but eventually all this stress caused her multiple issues. From a disturbingly young age, she suffered from intense fits of sleepwalking, as well as a fear of crowds known as demophobia. With the Great Depression looming, Lillian's frenzy to make her daughter into a star took an even more chilling turn. In 1929, when Betty was just 12, they packed up from St. Louis, Missouri, and moved to Hollywood to try and hit it big. The only problem was that Betty was too young. The minimum working age was 15. Instead of taking a step back and considering whether she should force her daughter into child labour, Lillian simply grew more determined and unhinged. Like many manipulative stage mothers, she lied about Betty's age to producers, saying she'd just turned 15. Once they saw Betty's face, producers were all too happy to believe it. One of Grable's first adult relationships really couldn't have gone worse. When she was young, she got together with a married man named George Raft, a tough guy actor associated with sinister figures like Bugsy Siegel. Well, he quickly proved just how tough he was. He beat Grable, who fled from the relationship. Most actors struggle to make it in Hollywood for years, but most actors aren't Betty Grable. In 1929, she premiered in her first film. By 1930, she had worked as a chorus girl before signing with legendary Hollywood producer Samuel Goldwyn. This made her one of the original Goldwyn girls, along with the inimitable Lucille Ball and Paulette Goddard. The lies about Betty's age eventually caught up to her and her mother. Although Fox Studios originally signed Grable, it didn't take them long to find out that she was much younger than she was pretending to be, and much younger than the law allowed. They fired her unceremoniously. Grable was irresistible to studios from almost her first role, and when she starred in 1936's Pigskin Parade, it was under an unusual agreement. 20th Century Fox had reached out to her specifically for the part, loaning her from her new studio, Paramount. The film was a hit and showcased Grable to the public, just not for the reasons you may think. Pigskin Parade was supposed to be Betty Grable's big break, but what it really did was earned the star her first rival. It was also the first feature film of a young woman named Judy Garland. Garland won over America with her role, leaving Betty somewhat in her shadow. Grable didn't have the best judgment when it came to her love life, and when she married the comedian and child actor Jackie Coogan in 1937, their relationship was a full-on mess. Coogan was still in the middle of a lawsuit against his parents, and the stress had split the couple up by 1939. For all her good girl looks and apple pie charms, Grable lived one scrappy existence as a struggling actor. After Pigskin Parade, she suddenly found herself typecast as a naive college student, starring in a series of humdrum roles and even duller films. Unhappy with her, Paramount fired her. Grable's last film with Paramount was the B-comedy $1 Million Legs with her then-husband Jackie Coogan. Aside from mixing business with pleasure, the film's title also gave Grable and her famous legs her lasting nickname. This was the beginning of the seductive image she would soon turn into worldwide success. After 1939, the 23-year-old Grable felt so washed up, she tried to retire from films altogether. The exhausted star took to Broadway instead, in the musical Du Barry Was a Lady. The play was an instant success. While Grable was on Broadway, studio head Darryl F. Zanuck saw her perform and knew that not only was she destined to be a star, she already was a star. He signed her to a long-term contract with 20th Century Fox, and her next film, Down Argentine Way, was a smash hit. But fame didn't come without drama. The 1942 classic Springtime in the Rockies was a hit for everyone involved, but Grable also got something else out of the deal: romance. While on set, she met debonair bandleader Harry James, who also starred in the film. The two hit it off, marrying a year later, but this union was doomed to fail. For one thing, when Grable and James first met, James was married, but then, when are they not? Though James eventually divorced his first wife to make an honest woman out of Grable, don't go thinking this came from the goodness of his heart. Grable found out that she was pregnant, an even worse moral quandary for the time, and the minute studio executives found out, they started pressuring the actors to marry in a hurry. When the couple had their firstborn daughter, they named her Victoria Elizabeth, after Grable's character in the film Springtime in the Rockies. Rich, famous, beautiful and talented, Betty Grable and Harry James were a Hollywood superstar couple. But behind closed doors, James was a serial philanderer. In fact, grossly enough, he was known for his indiscriminate taste. Soon after James and Grable started seeing each other, she had an unpleasant visit from the ghost of boyfriends past. Gangster actor George Raft never quite let her go, and when he found out she had taken up with someone else, he had one of his cronies tail the pair when they went home together. Grable and James were at home when they heard a loud thump and a series of groans from outside their window. They looked out just in time to see Raft's lackey cursing and limping away from his failed surveillance mission, having just fallen out of a tree. It may be hard to believe considering the stature of Grable's talent and fame, but she was incredibly insecure about her abilities. She was so insecure she consistently turned down movies that would stretch her acting skills, and was particularly wary about starring in movies opposite the most famous male actors. Grable's lack of belief in her acting abilities came back to haunt her in 1947. At that year's Academy Awards, actress Anne Baxter won the Oscar for her performance in The Razor's Edge. When Grable saw that, she might have been stung. Producers had originally offered her the part, but she turned it down, stubbornly sticking to her no challenges rule. In the 1950s, Grable was still one of the most popular actresses at the box office. Emboldened by her success, she did the one thing she hadn't done yet. She challenged herself. she told the studio she wanted a raise. Fox staunchly denied her request, but in response, Grable really hit her stride. She was so incensed, she got her contract out, walked into studio head Darryl Zanuck's office, and tore the papers up right in his face. It was a triumphant show of strength, but it backfired. In retaliation, Zanuck fired Grable from the next film she had lined up, and in doing so, he changed cinema history. That film was the lead role in the classic comedy Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, aka the part that shot Marilyn Monroe to stardom. For all her fame, this girl just couldn't seem to catch a break. Grable eventually reconciled with Zanuck and he repaid her with another cruel trick. The studio put their waning star in How to Marry a Millionaire, alongside none other than Monroe and the equally new and shiny Lauren Bacall. On set, rumours swirled about rivalries, but the truth is actually quite different. While working on How to Marry a Millionaire, Grable was under no illusions that her star was fading, or that Monroe and her assets were about to replace her and her legs in the public consciousness. Yet Grable was utterly kind throughout filming. In fact, during a publicity photo shoot for the movie, Grable happened to notice Monroe's toenails were in need of a paint. Did she mean girl Monroe and let her get photographed with chipped nails? No. Grable grabbed her own personal polish and gave Monroe a pedicure herself. Aw. Marilyn Monroe never forgot Grable's kindness, and one day she got the chance to repay her in a touching tribute. After Grable left Fox, the studio moved Monroe into her old dressing room, which still had her name on the door. When they asked to get a photo of Monroe in front of Grable's name, signalling a transition of stars, Monroe absolutely refused. Realising her time was done, Grable stepped away from the limelight in 1955. Instead of stardom, she focused on her marriage with Harry James, and the couple moved to Las Vegas. Besides the insatiable womanizing, Grable's second husband had other delightful qualities to round out his nomination for worst husband ever. He was also a rabid gambler and drinker, and as time wore on, he began to use Grable's hard-earned success as his meal ticket. Grable, being generally kind-hearted and very in love, somehow let him. In the 1960s, Grable found herself broke and out of the Hollywood studio system that had once rocketed her to fame. She had to resort to drastic measures. Using her famous Pinup pose, she did a series of commercials for Playtex just to make back some of the money her husband had lost, and then she lost her husband. All in all, Grable and Harry James stayed married for 22 pretty miserable years, with each coming new year marking a new low of betting, squandering, drinking, and philandering. In 1965, she finally worked up the courage to stand up for herself again, and divorced James on the grounds of extreme cruelty. Sounds about right. Sadly, Betty Grable died young. In the 1970s, only a few years after her career really went on the decline, doctors diagnosed her with lung cancer. On July 2nd, 1973, she died at the age of 56. An example of just how much Betty Grable influenced American culture. Before he was a magazine mogul, Hugh Hefner served in World War II, and like practically all of his comrades, fell in love with Grable's pin-up photo. Grable stuck in his head so much that when he returned home, he set to work on Playboy with her in mind. How's that for a legacy? Grable's pose in her iconic pin-up photo is now a classic, and she looks over one shoulder, back to camera, in a revealing white bathing suit. But there was good reason for this particular setup. When Grable showed up to the shoot, she was actually 7 months pregnant,